Hi, welcome to our 18th annual NAB wrap-up. It's springtime. This is one of the things we do. There's also baseball, cricket, but the wrap-up is more important to us, I think. Anyway, I'm Ray Blumenthal. I think I'm up here someplace, yes. Hey, that's me. I'm Ray Blumenthal. I am the current New York section chair. We just had an election. Oh, by the way, very, very important. We've had this problem in the past. So I'm going to ask everybody, and I'm making a big note about this, to please silence your cell phones. Please silence your cell phones because it can disturb people and they... Excuse me. I'm working right now, dear. No, I don't want to speak to the... Oh, hi, it's my granddaughter. Yes, yeah. No. Grandpa's working. I can't speak to the dog. Wolf to you too. All right. Thank you. Now, what was I saying? So, please turn them off or put them on silent. It's a lot of fun for some people when they have a call, but we've had this problem in the past, and then we hear a phone ring, and then somebody goes running out and upstairs. So, moving right along, we want to thank HBO, Jenny Montalbano, I most probably mispronounced her name, Rachel Schiffman, and Ted. Ted, you're up there? The projectionist. Wave to us, Ted. He's up there. Does a great job every year. He just doesn't do the projection. He does the video. And also, we're always impressed with the spread that HBO puts out every year. By the way, any of you salespeople here, HBO does not give receipts, so you cannot put it down in your expenses. Believe me, I've tried. It won't happen. Now I press another button. Mark Foreman, if you haven't already seen his camera. Mark, thanks for the slideshow. And this year, if your company showed up on the slides, you owe Mark $25. Yeah, I'll come around and get it. I've already paid him off.
No, he hasn't.
Last year, we did this for the first time, a teleconference between two other locations, HB Communications up in Connecticut, and the Long Island subsection, which is still forming at Viacom. We did this last year, too. We got a lot of very good feedback because there are people that want to be at this meeting but can't make it. Either they're working late. Plus, a lot of our membership has moved out voluntarily or involuntarily to the suburbs, like a lot of people now at NBC Sports and ESPN up in Connecticut that used to work in New York, and people at HBO, Viacom, Showtime in Harpark. And the funny thing is, where they're having this, it's literally around the corner from my office, but I had to drive all the way in for this meeting. And you'll be seeing them very shortly. And this meeting is being recorded. So the mere fact that you're here, you've given us permission if we show you. If you don't want to give us permission, you can leave right now. Okay, thank you. This is the current board, the way it is at the moment. I'm at the top. We have a lot of... We were going to do it alphabetically. I guess I would win again. But we have a lot of people on our board. We have one of the largest boards. Now, there's only X amount, I think it's 8 or 9 people that actually elected. But we have a lot of volunteers that run run committees. And as you can see, the names of various people, anybody that's a member can join a committee. If you go to our website, everybody has their email someplace on the website, and you can just email them if you're interested in working on a committee. But this is what keeps this section going. We've had some excellent meetings in the last couple of months, actually in the last 2 or 3 years, I think you'd all agree. And it's because we get a lot of cooperation from the members who make suggestions, who volunteer to help out, corporations that sponsor us, and we're looking forward to a lot more good meetings. Now, we've just had elections, You can see I'm not there. Thank God. But Bruce is here. There's Bruce with the collar. We'll be turning the official SMPTE bag over to him in July 1st. He will take over, if he can move by then. Bruce has to, well, there's this thing about every time you become a chair of this committee, something happens to you. I had my accident. Bruce has now got his neck problem. It's dangerous. It's hard work. It's hard work. It's dangerous. Herb Odland is once again Secretary-Treasurer and is desperately looking for somebody to replace him. So if you are interested, please let us know. Come to a couple of board meetings, talk to Herb, and if you still want to do it after that, we will put you up for a nomination. It was take over July 1st, but Herb would gladly walk away right now if he had somebody.
Ray, it's actually more like if you don't want to do it, start running now.
Yeah. By the way, you have a tradition. If you come to a board meeting and you happen to go to the restroom, you usually end up running a committee. But thank you, Herb, for all these years of doing this. And the new managers, by the way, the chair and the secretary-treasurer are one-year terms. Managers, elected managers, are two-year terms. We have 6, but every year 3 people are up to be renewed or run for elections. This year is Chuck Dill. I don't know if Chuck is here, but Chuck's the Chuck because Chuck's the one who puts together the party at the end of the year. So we want to make sure he stays on the board. Tim Dwight, who will be talking tonight. Tim does everything. Tim does our newsletter. I don't know how many people get our newsletter. We just started doing this. And he does this. He does quite a lot of stuff. And once in a while, he does work at his job. But Bill Tapazio said he actually saw you twice this year. That's his boss. Talking about the newsletter, if you want to advertise, the rates are really cheap. Otherwise, we would not. Otherwise, Tiffin wouldn't be in here. It's really, really cheap. Just give me a call. We'll negotiate a price, and you can put an ad in here. We're going to do this, at least 10 times a year? Are we aiming, or are we going to go for full 12?
Try for 12.
Okay, so we're trying for 12. The full membership plus people who sign up that are not members. You do not have to be a member to get the newsletter, but if you're not a member, you must sign up, because we have no way of knowing if you want this. And like any other newsletter or anything else, if you want to unsubscribe, you can do that too. Do we have anybody ever unsubscribes? Yeah.
I think it was.
One guy. Oh, okay. Yeah, one guy. And when we find him, right. But it's working out very, very well. So take a look at it, and if you want to put an article in, for instance, a couple of manufacturers, a couple of dealers put in information about seminars they're running. You can put in anything you want as long as it pertains to this industry and the New York area. If you're a manufacturer, you're coming to town and you're going to have an open house, as long as we feel it's worthy, we will put it in here for $50. No, we will put it in here. So enough of the newsletter, but I do thank Tim. And, of course, Mark Foreman, our continuous photographer, was also elected. Now, let's see if I can get this thing to work. Okay. The jam session, we're making jam. It seems that the industry, it seems like engineers like to play instruments. We found there's a group of people in our industry that get together and play. So Thursday, June 19th, we're going to have a jam section. Tim can give you more information on it. I don't play anything, though I do play a mean comb, very good, but they wouldn't take me in. But if you play an instrument and you're a member of SMPTE, those are 2 requirements. You must play an instrument and be a member of SMPTE. You're welcome to join this. Alan knows more about it.
I can give you a little background. I'm kind of involved with it. Basically, it's based on a concept that Sony has been doing for several years, where they took people internally and they had a band and they just jammed and had some fun with it. eventually got a pretty, I guess, good working units, and they've been doing a lot of benefit stuff with it. And the gentleman who's helping us to organize it, Glenn Cuvier, is an ex-Sony employee. And we just figured it'd be a lot of fun because so many of us in the technology industry probably all started in garage bands. So, we're just going to have fun with it, see how it works out. If we all sound good together and we agree that we like it, maybe we'll keep it going, something we can do to play at events, parties, whatever. So, but yeah, if any of you play, we would certainly encourage you coming out. There'll be details for this jam. And I believe we're in need of drummers. If anybody here drums or knows anybody in the industry. And that's the only requirement, is that you are somehow aligned to the broadcast industry, filmmaking industry, whatever.
Yes, film and TV, let's put it that way, film and TV. Whatever film is, I've forgotten. But little holes, that's right, sprocket holes. Now, we have another meeting after this. June 12th is the last meeting for our year. Our year starts in July, ends in June. And I'm going to have Tim come up and talk a little bit more about this. I thought this had something to do with gambling. I thought it said OTB, it's OTT.
Yes, well, hello, I'm Tim Dwight, and I'm the producer of this meeting. It's really good to see all of you here tonight. Got a really good crowd. So Bruce Fulmer and Mike Strine from ABC are actually producing this meeting and in June 12th. It should be a really interesting one. Just what is over-the-top television? Why is it important? And how does it get to your home? Well, this might answer some of the questions, and the things that may look familiar. You've got everything from Amazon to YouTube. So come to the June 12th meeting. Registration is already open. We'll update the website probably tomorrow so that you can, it'll make it easy to sign up. And some people have already signed up because they've gotten the newsletter and it was right in the newsletter. So keep looking at the newsletter and sign up for meetings. They're great. So the meeting producers tonight, besides yours truly, are Rich Torpy in the Long Island section, and also Brian Koblers in Connecticut. You'll see pictures of them shortly when the time comes. They're on a live video conference two-way, so that they'll be involved with us in the question and answer session after the program. So at this point, I'd like to introduce our panelists. They'll stand up in a moment, one at a time, when it's time for them to speak. There's Craig Cuttner from HBO. There's Michael Grotticelli from Broadcast Engineering, and Mark Schubin. So first, I'd like to invite Craig Cuttner to come to the podium. He's the Senior Vice President of Advanced Technology here at HBO. Give Craig a good hand.
Thanks, Tim, and shout out to Connecticut. I live in Norwalk, so someday I promise I'll get up there, but never seems to happen. I'd like to welcome you to the Mark Schubin Show. I'm the straight man. I always go first, just to reaffirm that it's really all about Mark. And thanks again for the great turnout. I know we had some issues with our security trying to let more people in, so I'm glad that worked. And I'd like to second raise thanks to Ted and Jenny and everyone. And I also want to reaffirm that I have nothing to do with this. The East Coast Production Department sponsors this event. Somehow SMPTE keeps inviting me back. I don't know why. But it's not because I had anything to do with it, I can tell you. But I'm just a front man for the HBO group that actually goes to NAB and does extensive amounts of research. We have teams assigned. So the real Herculean effort was John Byler, Seth Riegelhop, and Diane Trineski, who's our head of media and production operations. And I also would mention that we've had a few reorgs this year, and I'm now SVP of Technology Development and Standards, which is sort of the same thing I was doing before, but it's always good to have reorgs. I also, because Ray mentioned OTB, since we're talking about Vegas, I would like to place an over-under bet, because most of the trade associations have changed their names of late. You know, the NCTA is now Cable Telecommunications. So I think, based on the change of NAB over time, that it's going to be a few more years, but they're going to change their name to the Networking Association of Broadband Dudes. Because if you do the search for towers and transmitters, which I always do just to sanity check the nature of the show, I found one tower and a couple of transmitters. So I have a feeling that the broadcasting show income stream is now favored more towards the South Hall, which is where the feature areas were spread out this year. In fact, there were two areas, both in the North Hall and the Central Hall, that were dedicated to little startup companies, which is a trend also in some of the trade shows. And it's kind of interesting because it does add a fresh breath of the new technology and not the stodgy way of doing things. It's part of the tradition now of moving to IT infrastructure. But it was sort of interesting to see the, it reminds me, I wonder if there's a show of hands, who went to the NAB in Atlanta many years ago, where the broadcasters were on one side of the street and the Grateful Dead concert was on the other. And that is the sort of trend of the way NAB's been going over the last few years. And I would like to mention, as I talked about the HBO folks who go to specific areas of interest, I will say the one interest I had and was investigating while I was out there was closed captioning. Now, I've been doing closed captioning work since the 70s, and I will just, for those of you who haven't been paying attention to the FCC lately, they are gunning for bear with closed captioning. Accessibility in general, but captioning in particular. In fact, we had a meeting the other day about it, and I said, well, do you think they'll let up a little on captioning because net neutrality is distracting them? And the answer from the Washington folks was, no, they can win this one, and they're going to. So one of the things that was in the investigation process, it was amazing how closed captioning has been left out of workflow. So, for example, many of the new captioning rules have to do with the timely delivery of quality captions. There's only one editing system that I was aware of that has captioning even in its timeline. It's built into Adobe Premiere, missing from Avid, missing from Final Cut. And if you really think about it, when you have to do captions now, and one of the potential risks is doing captions in short-form promotional material, which has the shortest time frame. It's aired wet, to use the film analogy. They're going to have to build that into the editing systems. It's going to have to be done during the production process. So that's something that was on my radar to look out for, and that's one of the things I would give you a heads up on. So into my soapbox. We talked a little bit about the North Hall with small startups, and somehow stuck over there was Cisco. Don't know why they were over there. The NAB Labs was there, as was the NHK again. They had a very nice area, including some little startups that were working in HDR. And HDR is on our radar. Dolby's certainly all over it. But interestingly, there are lots of other little pockets of HDR. The other part that was interesting was the Central Hall. They had an area that was not only just featuring startups, but they actually had them in their elevator pitch mode, where they would stand up and pitch you what they were. Not sure what that was relevant. I mean, how that was relevant to the people who are actually buying equipment and kicking tires. But that was kind of interesting because it was right next to the area that had drones. So I wasn't sure if the drones were going to shoot the folks. The Central Hall also had, the usual suspects with Sony in the big booth. But the South Hall was where 90,000 of our intimate friends packed into little booths and listened to very loud pitches. So to keep my remarks short, HDR was cool. The cloud was everywhere, really everywhere. I mean, products that probably shouldn't have a cloud component really did. And in terms of Mark is the king of finding cool little things. But one of the things I found that was cool was a TEM had a little stick with GoPros stuck all over it. Okay, so you can make a fisheye with that, except that it fed a system that processed it into a virtual reality Oculus Rift headset. So you could actually move your head around, and it would stitch all the camera views together and give you a 3D view. That was kind of cool. Anyway, so without further ado, I want to segue. I want to go back to Tim for the next introduction. So thanks. I want to keep it short because it's all about Mark. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Craig. Next, I'd like to introduce Michael Grotticelli. He's the online editor of Broadcast Engineering Magazine and publisher of Video Journalist Today. Give a big hand to Michael, please.
Are the slides queued up? Are the slides queued up?
Yeah, it's coming up.
Great. Hi, I'm Mike Grotticelli. Interesting NAB this year. I'm going to focus less on technology and more about trends, bigger trends that we saw this year. The first one was consolidation. Since January 1st of this year, we've seen 13 acquisitions, which is unprecedented in this industry. Some of it was a long time coming. Some of it was a total surprise. The main reason was basically that companies that are not in this software business needed to get in quickly. That's how you do it. You know, we live in a time where things are moving so quickly that R&D teams can't keep up so much, so they have to buy a company basically to get a new product line. And it's more cost effective for them to do that as well. So that's what we see happening. And all these companies were buyers, by the way. These were not sellers, they were all buyers, which was amazing. A lot of them, again, bought the company because of, again, software networks. And the other reason was that basically money is cheap now. You can borrow money fairly reasonably. So we see a lot of venture capitalists coming into our business and buying up companies and doing very well, quite honestly. One example would be Belden bought, let me see if I get this right. Belden bought, Francisco Partners bought Grass Valley 3 years ago for $100 million. Sold it to Belden this year for $220 million. And that's, so it just shows you the kind of return that people are getting from this industry, and so they're willing to invest in it. Another reason is, again, it's basically there are too many people, companies in specific categories, and it's just a natural culling. There's too many competitors, basically, and so people are not making money in general, so they're going to basically buy a company to get access to more customers so they can increase revenue. And clearly they're looking for new kind of customers. They're not only going to broadcasters anymore. People like Netflix, DirecTV, anyone that's doing OTT, those kind of things, they all need equipment like transcoders and encoders, and that's where people are going. This year was really, I'm going to say, was the year 4K. Last year, of course, was 4K was announced and whatnot, but this year we saw a lot of maturation of product. We now have a lot of different pieces. Parallel processing computers are now fast and powerful enough that they can replicate things done in hardware previously. And the prices, of course, are significantly reduced because it's software. So that's got a lot of customers very juiced about that. Also, as an equipment vendor, it's very difficult to make any money as a hardware-only vendor. People don't want to, number one, spend the price, but number two, the flexibility that software gives you is much more appealing to people these days because they want to do so many more things. They've got to go to TV, they've got to put output to the internet, to tablets, whatever. So you've got a lot more work to do. And 4K, again, is becoming more ubiquitous as far as a format. People understand it now. It's pretty seamless as far as you've used an HD camera before. You can use a 4K camera right out of the box. But what's interesting, again, is the price levels of cameras is one thing. We saw Blackmagic, who annually comes out with low-priced products, but they had a studio camera, and I'll show a picture next, but for under $3,000 with basically what looked like a tablet on the back, but it was a 10-inch viewfinder. And on the other end of that was AJ Video had a new camera called Scion for under $9,000, but it's a really high-end 4K camera for under $10,000. That's a great deal. And of course, these imagers imagers can shoot both 4K and HD. So at this point, a lot of people that are buying 4K cameras are shooting HD. And they're doing it for different reasons. In sports, we use it for instant replays. But just basically independent guys are shooting a lot of HD with them just to make pay for themselves. These are some of the products that I saw around the floor that are all, again, 4K capable. Top left is the Kahuna switcher from Snell. It's been around for several years, but it can now do 4K. Actually, it could do 4K last year as well. But it can do simultaneous 4K and HD. So if you've got a project that's, shooting, going to both types of televisions, that's the way to do it. Everything from cameras, and then on the far right there is the Blackmagic Studio camera. It actually produced some really good pictures, again, under $3,000. And then on the far left is this is 4A, that's an up converter, or down converter, I should say, excuse me. It goes from 4K to HD or back and forth. And that's important because we know the CEA said this year that as of 2015, about 1 million TV sets, 4K TV sets will be sold. We need content for those sets. So any way you can get it, either acquiring it naturally or converting it, that's what people are doing. The other thing we saw at the show was 8K. NHK and Ikegami had presentations in their booth of 8K equipment. It wasn't a live demonstration, but it was coming off a disc. But the point was that it was there, it looked beautiful, but many manufacturers are worried that they're confusing the market. People that they're trying to sell 4K cameras to are hearing 8K and going, maybe I should wait. And that's the worst thing you can do to a customer. If they wait, they don't buy anything. But that being said, Japan is pushing ahead. You know, they want to have it as part of their Olympics and for other things as well. So, and I guess bragging rights on top of everything else. The other thing we saw, the big thing was HEVC compression. It was everywhere, and as far as transcoding companies, software companies, all were promising, 50% bandwidth savings over MPEG-4. But if you really talk to people, they're not getting 50% right now. The software, the algorithms are not there yet. They're saying by the end of the year they'll be about 45%. I have here 20%, but someone today, I was at the Streaming Media Expo, and someone at Elemental said they're getting 40% right now, but they're not at 50%. So there's a way to go there as far as getting the bandwidth savings you're looking for. Second thing is the licensing is stalled right now with MPEG-LA. They've got some proposed rules, but they haven't been agreed to by everybody, and they're trying to pull patent holders together, and that's been a fight. So when I spoke to the MPEG-LA people, they said maybe the end of the summer or later before they'll have some kind of a standard or a patent agreement. But that being said, I did see on the floor some very cool compressions. I saw a Fraunhofer Institute, which is a German basically lab where they develop product. They were showing 4K at like 1.5 megabits. That's pretty cool. And it looked really good. Okay. And of course, we've seen 4K projects being delivered via HEVC are starting to be showing up all over the place. One of the most recent ones was an opera. Mark Schuman's a big opera fan. It was in Vienna. The Vienna State Opera did a 4K production of, it was Verdi's Nabucco, which I'm not very familiar with. But anyways, it was a Sony S55 camera. They streamed it over the internet so people could watch it, and it worked very well. So there's definitely promise there. And of course, this brings me to the other trend that I saw, which was video over IP. This is, as Craig mentioned, but certainly everyone agrees, is really the future of broadcast. I said this last year, but this year I'm more convinced of that. It's much more efficient than doing an over-the-air broadcast. And you know who your user is. You know who the guy is or girl that's watching, so you can market to them directly. You can use their name for all kinds of things. So, and I believe that even cameras one day will have IP spigots in the back. When that happens, what happens is live productions need less people, less cameramen. You'll see robotic cameras mounted in a stadium, and maybe one or two guys running around on the field with a handheld camera. But it really changes the dynamic of how things are produced and how they're delivered, because then you can deliver it immediately to the internet. So that's really important. And which brings my next point, which is about IP. I kind of, in talking to different people, everyone kept saying, yeah, definitely, IP is the future, IP is the future. But of course, we're all sitting here with SDI infrastructures. So the question is, and I just, in the magazine, I don't want to be goofy, but I asked people, how long do you think it's going to be before the changeover happens? And of course, with all the legacy equipment we have, some people said 10 years, some people said 20 years, some people said 30 years even, before we see scaling off. But my best response actually was from Bruce Devlin, who's, as you guys all know him, he's a SMPTE member, but he's also one of the co-designers of the MXF specification. And he's also the CTO of Amberfin, which, by the way, was bought by Delet this year, which was announced at the show. He put it best when he said, SDI will eventually go away. It's easy to look into the past and say old is bad, and look into the future and say new is good. Getting rid of SDI is more than just history, though. It's like flies. No one really likes flies. I don't know anyone who goes into their garden and rejoices that flies are buzzing all over the barbecue. I do know, however, that flies are a vital part of the food chain, and although they have many downsides, getting rid of them would break our existing way of growing, cultivating, and managing food. SDI, I think, is similar to that. Getting rid of SDI will mean completely redefining the whole value chain of the media industry. Without SDI, most of what we know today as television would have to be redefined. At almost every point in the chain, where we have to be real time, you would still find SDI. SDI may seem old and lack the scalability of IP, but is also apparently simple and secure. Over time, IP workflows and geographic optimizations using the cloud will reverse the situation, but probably not before I retire. So basically, again, the future is a dedicated one-to-one, sophisticated and customizable relationship with the customer via the internet protocol. It's better for the content provider because they know exactly who you are and what your viewing habits are. But it's also good for the consumer who can now watch whatever they want, whenever they want, wherever they are. The concept of TV everywhere, which, although not ubiquitous yet, and people don't understand what it means a lot. You know, TV everywhere is you can watch TV programming on any device, but only within a certain radius of your house, a Wi-Fi radius of your house. You know, once you go beyond that, then you lose that signal, so you find another one. So, at the end of the day, this year's NAB show was, I would say, more evolutionary than revolutionary. You know, there were a number of key, I should say, cool technology products, but nothing to write home about, I would say. The landscape of television is changing. That's my story. The manufacturers are getting less again. They're going to new products, and they're talking about things called software-defined networks. And although no one really knows what that means, what it represents really is an application layer which orchestrates all the applications, and then different task-specific software modules sitting on top. Kind of like an iPhone with little apps on it. When you want to do transcoding, you push the transcoding button. That's really the future of production, network production. And when we get that point, then we'll have things like a la carte programming, things that are more cost-effective for providers to provide and still make money. And I'm going to say the last thing is, regardless of the ABC versus Aereo case outcome before the Supreme Court, which is going to be decided later in June, I believe, we're seeing cable operators making deals with the likes of Netflix and others in the hopes of retaining subscribers that might cut the cord otherwise. That's because, the old thing about if you can't beat them, join them, they're realizing that the cat's out of the bag, and they really have to do something about it. So IP is the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Next up is Mark Schubin. Mark is as you know, a multi-Emmy award winner engineer, and he's been to every booth of every NAB since 1973. So please welcome Mark Schubin to the podium.
I brought something to read in case I'm boring. I hope you did too. Do I need to push something? Oh, okay. So, bravo to David Leitner for the presentation he did 2 weeks ago. And from the applause that I'm hearing, it seems that most of the people in the room were there, and so I'm not going to repeat anything that he talked about, but I do have some comments on some of the things he talked about. By the way, you don't need to take notes on these slides. You can if you want to, but there's a PDF that's already available at that URL, and it'll be up at the end of the presentation also. It's basically bit.ly/RCA in caps, BP lowercase, and then E for excellent. So he gave a brilliant cinematography and videography presentation, but I differ with him slightly about whether sex attracts buyers. I have an interesting psych light to mention, some stuff about PL versus B4 lenses, some stuff about the Aja-Scion's optical filtering, which was mentioned in the video that he showed, and both of those relate to the Grass Valley 4K camera. Blackmagic's 4K connections, high dynamic range reference monitoring, the death of SDI, supercomputing, and a relationship between supercomputing and the Sony Alpha 7S. So we'll start with, does sex attract buyers? Now, David showed a picture, something like this, that was closer in on the naked woman, and he said that, well, he doesn't like it the same way I don't like it, but it does draw people to the booth. But this picture is one that I took right after the raffle was over. The woman had been out there for maybe 30 seconds pulling the numbers out of the raffle bag, and as soon as the raffle was over, you can see everybody's leaving. And this was the opportunity to have your picture taken with the naked woman. Okay, a little bit on the cyc light. Flow light had this very interesting cyc light. There's only 3 LEDs in it. And they're 40-watt LEDs, and then they have this bizarre plastic diffusion system. And so you place that one unit at the bottom of the cyc, and supposedly it lights it all very evenly. I leave it for you to try yourselves. PL versus B4 mounts. Those are the only 2 standardized mounts in the industry, truly standardized mounts in the industry. And Fujinon came out with lenses for each of them. On the left is a PL mount lens, the new Cabrio Premier 25 to 300. It's the longest range zoom there is for a PL mount. And the B4 equivalent of that would be a 12 by 9.8 lens, so going out to 117 millimeters. On the right is a B4 lens, and it's an 18 by 5.5, so it goes out to 99 millimeters. And the 35 millimeter equivalent would be 14 to 254. Now, the lens on the right is a hand-holdable lens. The lens on the left, I wouldn't want to try that. Pretty big, pretty heavy. But there are some more issues. What about long zooms? What if you're shooting a sporting event or a concert or something? The sort of thing that you normally have a 99, 100, 100 to 1 zoom lens on. On the left is a typical Fujinon zoom, 99 by 8.4. The 35 millimeter equivalent for that is 22 to 2,132 millimeters. Nobody's got anything even approaching it. The other lens I showed you, 300 millimeters, that's also the high end of Canon zoom. It's as far as you go. That's 7 times less than what these lenses do. So how do you shoot with a PL mount camera when you're in a ballpark or something? Well, people say, no problem, we have a solution for that. We have an adapter. And Abel Cine, where we were for the last meeting, sells one of these adapters. It's at the right. And if it's absolutely perfect, if it's taking every single photon of light and doing to it exactly what it's supposed to do, then there's about a 2.6 stop light loss using that adapter. So if you were starting at f1.4, you're someplace around 3.5 or something like that. And it's said to compensate for different color depths. And maybe it does. I haven't been able to test these things, but let me explain what those different color depths are. This is the most standardized lens mount that there is. It's the HDTV B4 mount for a 2/3 inch format. It's standardized in BTA standard S1005A. And notice that after the beam splitting block, there is one plane that the green comes out in, and then 5 microns later, there's a blue plane, and then 10 microns later, there's a red plane. And that doesn't even make optical sense, because green is between red and blue optically. But that's the standard because that was the best that the camera and lens manufacturers were able to come up with. So in a PL camera, you want everything to fall on a single sensor at the same time. So you have to compensate for those different back depths. Now here is, this is what's inside a typical broadcast zoom lens. There are 4 groups. There's the focus group that focuses the picture. There's the variator group, or the magnifier changer. That's the part that zooms. There's the compensator, which maintains focus as you zoom. And then there's just relay optics that relays the image to your sensor. Well, there are 36 elements in what I've shown you here, and even just the relay optics, which is not doing any magnification or compensation or focusing, it's got 7 elements. So how many pieces of glass do we have in those B4 to PL adapters, and are those pieces of glass absolutely perfect so they are not going to mess up the pictures? So here's the Aja Scion, which, as I mentioned, David Leitner showed their video, and one of the things in the video I was kind of surprised because they said, oh yeah, we use an optical low-pass filter. And sure enough, I looked up their brochure, and this is out of their brochure. They do use an optical low-pass filter. But I want to know how. Because here's what their sensor is. It's got a single sensor with a Bayer filter on it. The Bayer filter has a very different pattern for green versus red and blue. So your optical filter for red and blue should be twice as tight as it is for green. How do you make an optical filter for a single sensor that's going to work on both green and red and blue? I don't think you can. So I don't know what their optical filter is doing, but it is not eliminating aliasing. By the way, when you do have a Bayer sensor, there's also a question of resolution. This slide I first showed you in 2008. There's a quote down at the bottom from Peter Senton, who at the time was working for a company called Thomson Grass Valley. Now it's Grass Valley, a Belden brand. But he said if DALSA and Red 1, which were the hot 4K cameras at the time, are 4K, then the Panavision Genesis and the Sony F23 are 6K, which are cameras that were considered only HDTV cameras. Now, it is possible to make a 4K prism camera. Here is one that was shown in the SMPTE journal in March of 2001. You see it on the dolly on the left there. Those are the three sensors, and it had a gigantic telecentric lens. In the middle picture, you can see a strand of 35 millimeter film down at the bottom. The sensor is larger than an IMAX frame. The telecentric lens took care of that, but the MTF of that was quite good because you had 3 4K sensors. That's not what we have in any of the 4K cameras that are being sold today. So, David told you about the Grass Valley 4K prototype. This is tremendously exciting for when it comes out because they are saying it's going to be a 3-chip prism-based camera. So we can have true 4K, no losses because of the color filtering, no problem with optical low-pass filtering, but we don't have any sensor details yet. So we don't know what they were showing at NAB. And it will be 2/3 inch format, which means you can use a B4 lens with no light loss whatsoever. So great. Whether the modulation transfer function at 4K is good enough to call the lens a 4K lens, that's a different issue. The reason, by the way, that I'm showing a 1928 ornate Filmo at the right is because we have no idea what this camera is going to be like yet. So some people complain, why are you showing a 1928 camera? So here's a 2014 camera. It's the digital Bolex, which was at NAB this year. There was another 3-chip 2/3 inch camera, a new one that was shown, and that was the Flovel FZB3 with ultra-high sensitivity. They offer a spec saying it works down to 0.003 lux, or sorry, 3 zeros in there. But you know, we don't know what the noise is on that or anything, so it's not a very useful spec. So, Blackmagic Design, a bunch of people have been talking about their stuff, and on the top we have the Ursa camera on the left. David gave a nice disquisition on that 2 weeks ago. In the middle is the studio camera. I love the guy with his square jaw, and you can't see it, but his hand is on the zoom control there, and he's zooming a lens that has a 2:1 zoom ratio. And then at the right is the Teranex converter. Now, all of those, if you go to the Blackmagic site, they're all labeled as Ultra HD, but they're also all labeled as 12G SDI. And that is, in fact, the level of SDI that you need if you are transmitting 60 frames per second of 4K. Down at the bottom, we have Blackmagic's new production switcher for 4K, their routing switcher for 4K, and their decklink cards for 4K, and all of those are listed as Ultra HD, but they're only 6G SDI, which means that they can only do a maximum of 30 frames per second at 4K. So you come out of the camera with your 12G SDI and you plug it into somebody else's product because the Blackmagic products can't handle it. Now, how about shooting versus viewing higher resolutions? There are many reasons why it's good to shoot in higher resolution. One of them is that you can reframe in post. You can do image stabilization in post without losing any resolution. There's a peculiar one, which is if you have a big enough sensor and something like the Z-Par lenses, you can do stereoscopic 3D on a single sensor, which has certain advantages. But watching is a little different. So on the right, I'm showing a very large display that was at the NHK booth, and it was showing 8K. And in front of it, about 3 feet in front of it, you see the footprints where you're supposed to stand to watch it. So as long as that's how you watch television at home, by all means, go for a 4K set. Or 8K. Here is something that was released by the European Broadcasting Union at the Hollywood Post-Alliance Tech Retreat in 2013. And these are viewer tests that they did of HD versus 4K on a 56-inch screen. The red line is somebody sitting at a typical viewing distance, 2.7 meters or 9 feet. The black line is somebody sitting or standing at a 1.5 times the height distance, which works out to about 40 inches for a 56-inch TV. So if you're standing 3.5 feet in front of your 56-inch TV, then you get the improvements that are shown at the right. Now, there is definitely an improvement. So people who say you can't see 4K on a standard TV at home, they're lying. But people who say 4K is really significant on a standard TV at home, they're also lying. Because the red line shows about 1/3 of a grade of improvement. The black line shows about 1/2 of a grade of improvement. Now, it's still an improvement. That's significant. But prior to compression, you're talking 8 times the data rate. Now, this is the SMPTE logo that you're all familiar with. And I just wanted to point out that it has an M in it. The M stands for motion. So here are 2 pictures shot with the same camera at effectively different frame rates. The upper picture shot at 50 frames per second, the lower picture shot at 300 frames per second. This appeared in a BBC Research white paper in 2008. Notice that the ties and the tracks have equivalent sharpness in both of the images. They are exactly the same resolution. Let's call it 4K, call it 8K, call it HD, whatever you feel like, but they're exactly the same. But I think that everyone in the room will recognize that the train does not have the same sharpness in the 2 pictures because we deal with motion pictures. And therefore, dynamic resolution is what we should be talking about, not static resolution. So here's the same European Broadcasting Union at last year's International Broadcasting Convention in September, and this time they're showing the improvement for increasing frame rate. And now they show that a doubling of frame rate gives you a full grade of improvement. So doubling of frame rate is twice the data rate. Going from HD to 4K is 8 times the data rate. So you get between 1/3 and 1/2 of a grade of improvement for going from HD to 4K. You get a full grade of improvement for just doubling the frame rate, doubling the data rate. So which gives you more bang for the buck? Now, this was at NAB 2014 at the Technology Summit on Cinema. There were actually 2 presentations that came to pretty much the same conclusion. This one is from the Swiss Federal Polytechnic School, and they're showing a tremendous improvement going from 100 nits to 400 nits. 100 nits is the standard for video monitoring, reference monitoring. 400 nits is sort of the low end of what home TVs do. 1,000 nits is maybe the high end of what home TVs do. 4,000 nits is what the new Dolby Pulsar monitor was doing. So it looks like here we're getting maybe the most bang for the buck because maybe we're adding 20%, maybe not even, to the raw data rate, and we're getting a tremendous improvement. So here's high dynamic range reference monitoring. This is what David scoffed at 2 weeks ago, and he's right to scoff. The 100 nits is definitely low because it's not what people watch at home. It is what people watch in color grading facilities and in video shading areas. But just to give you an idea of what stuff is available out there, at the bottom I have a Samsung TV that has 1500 nits of peak brightness. And the typical Samsung home TVs in the range, again, of 450 to 900 nits. So all these things interact. Now, down at the bottom, take a look at the chart that I've put there first. On the left column is frame rates, 24, 30, 60, and 120 frames per second. Across the top are different types of resolution, 720p resolution, 1080 resolution, Quad HD, which is the 3840 across, and 4K, which is a full 4096. Now, what I've shown in the boxes in the chart is how long it takes something to cross the screen without an alias. So if we do 120 frames per second and we have 720p HD, it takes a little over 10 seconds to cross the screen and not have any motion aliases. But if we go to 4K and we do it at 30 frames per second, which is what that black magic stuff at 6G SDI can handle, it takes 137 seconds to cross the screen without aliasing. So 2.5 minutes. Everybody got the time to wait for that as somebody walks across the screen slowly? So on the right, I'm now showing some aliases. The circle on the right is what you can see. The red oval that I've added is what you want. That's the desired signal. And all those other diagonal lines that are apparent inside the circle are aliases that you don't want. So as you increase the frame rate, you spread those other lines out and eventually get them outside the circle. So that's good. But if they're inside the circle, notice that some of them are really black and some of them are kind of gray. And it turns out that if you don't have enough contrast, you don't see the alias. Great. So one of the problems with high dynamic range is you're increasing the contrast, and therefore you're making the aliases more visible. So I don't know how many of you went to the Dolby demo, but they had a piece where these cars with chrome were coming out of a dark garage into broad daylight, and the chrome was spectacular, and the speculars off the chrome were spectacular, but the motion judder was horrendous because there was so much contrast. It was a 4,000 nit monitor. So here's another thing that David showed was Synergy saying SDI must die. Yes, so must everything someday. The sun is going to burn out. And the pioneers are the ones with arrows in their backs. And the first modern HD TV camera in New York was here in 1973 at the New York Coliseum, and I panned it. And even 15 years later, several companies went into the HD TV production business. None of them still exist today. So, you know, was it a good idea to get into stereoscopic 3D TV? Was it a good idea to get into teletext? We were talking about that a few minutes ago. Anybody remember the D6 recorder? That's it at the right, about this high, and well, actually pretty close to the size of this thing. So here's a headline that appeared in Convergence magazine. I called it up on the web. It says, "Broadcasting is dead, long live digital choice." The headline appeared in March 1997. And broadcasting has been dead, lo, those many years. That said, here is a diagram of all mobile videos, Titan mobile production truck. It's a high-end production truck. It's got positions for 25 people doing their thing in the truck. And I'd like to give you a thought experiment. Think of what size this might be if all of the electronics in the truck were reduced to a single chip. Okay, while you're thinking about that, here's another thing that was at NAB. Ross, the people who make equipment, they're now in the truck business. They are renting production trucks, just like other truck companies. But they're shooting for the low-end market, the high school sports kind of thing. So this truck has positions for 6 people. And while those of you in the truck business might consider it bad news that Ross is entering the truck business, the possibly good news is they've started something called the Open Truck Initiative. And they will make everything freely available to anyone. So schematics, layouts, blueprints, anything you want, they'll give it to you for free. And they are planning to train people so that they can go into a Ross truck, or they can go into your truck if it matches the Ross Open Truck Initiative, and everybody will know exactly where everything is. The schematics will all be the same. People can fix stuff and so on. So how are you doing on that thought experiment of how big all mobile videos Titan would be if all the electronics were reduced to a single chip? Here is the answer. Because all of those 25 people still need places to do the things that they do. And they need control surfaces to control the things that they do. And they need monitoring to see the things that they do. So, you know, maybe you could say the air conditioner would be a little smaller, but on the other hand, if the truck is got everything reduced to a chip, that chip is probably going to run really hot. So what happens, though? People don't like sending trucks around because it takes a lot of people. Your director is going various places. What if you don't move the production staff around? So for the Sochi Olympics, NBC had some stuff that was done in Stanford instead of in Sochi. And the device I'm showing you at the right was not at NAB this year, but it was at IBC last fall. It's called the SVS switcher, and it was just a control surface. The control surface was in Amsterdam at IBC. The electronics were in Germany, and everything was running IP between the two of them. And not only were the electronics in Germany, but they are IP-based electronics in Germany, so they could have other control surfaces, and if somebody was doing an effect that needed more processing, they would get more of the processors. And the people who weren't doing effects that needed more processing would get less of the processors. So IP seems to be a really wonderful thing. And so here was perhaps the ultimate IP device at the show. It's the new Evertz EXE routing switcher. It runs at 46 terabits per second. And it has 2,304 ports. Now I'm showing you a poster on the left. It's a poster that I took a picture of, but it is a poster. Why am I showing you that rather than the real thing? Because the real thing was in the booth and I could have shot it. It's because the real thing was behind glass. And why was the real thing behind glass? Two reasons. One, it had 15 tons of air conditioning. The other was, not even counting the 15 tons of air conditioning, the fan noise was likened by someone else to the sound of a DC-6. The air conditioning was most of the power. That's true, yeah. And I was talking to somebody from Evertz, and he said while they were setting it up, they had a problem with the air conditioner, and all of the routing got flaky. So, you know, pioneering, bleeding edge, it's great. It's a magnificent achievement. My hat's off to Evertz. It's wonderful. But just bear in mind it is bleeding edge. But one of the nice things is that other poster that I'm showing you at the right, they do have all of the pieces. So if you have a plant that's currently SDI and you don't want to change every piece of equipment, they have all the necessary converters from SDI to IP and from IP back to SDI, and they can do whatever is required. But coax still works. So here was a demonstration at Altera of 12G SDI over 60 feet of coax. 60 feet will get you from one end of a truck to another. And Belden at the HPA Tech Retreat this year said even longer, that they're talking maybe more than 300 feet that they'll be able to do 12G SDI. And routing, you know, maybe you don't have a need for 2,304 ports, in which case maybe the thing at the upper right, which is a 2-rack unit 64 squared router from Envision, which was at the Grass Valley booth, maybe that'll work for you. 2 rack units is a lot smaller than 40 rack units, which is what the Evertz system was, and that's not counting the converters. So here's some opinions about the show. On the upper left is someone says, this is the year everything changed. And she was concerned primarily about the cloud. And then down at the bottom, there's Pete Putman, and he says, you know, the NAB show didn't quite have the buzz that he was expecting. Well, you expect the expected. There on the upper left is the outdoor exhibits on Monday morning. You could have fired a shotgun and not hit anyone. Tuesday morning, South Hall, but the upper part of the South Hall. You could have fired a shotgun and not hit anyone. North Hall, Wednesday morning, fire the same shotgun. Not going to hit anyone, except this one was the same also Monday morning and Tuesday morning. And then there's the Black Magic booth Monday afternoon, and it's packed. And you can't get past anything. So the South Hall lower, the upper section of the lower South Hall was packed all the time. The rest of NAB, not so much. But evolution sometimes becomes revolution. So when you can get things cheap enough, small enough, light enough, then interesting things happen. But when does it happen? Maybe tomorrow-ish, which was the name of a company in that startup area in the Central Hall. What they have is a social media DVR. So let's say you want to watch something on your DVR, but you want to have your second screen device that's going to tell you what everybody thinks about it all the time. Well, if you watch it 10 hours later, nobody else is watching it, so you don't have that information. So this records what everybody thought about it and plays it back to your second screen while you're watching the show. Then there's the stick that I think Craig was talking about, the immersive cameras, 6 GoPro Heroes in a cube, and they get stitched into a 360-degree view, and then you wear the immersive helmet, and you can move your head around. It's quite fun. But there's useful stuff, too. Talent tracking. Rushworks had this thing called the PT Mini. The woman in the black dress is a real person. The woman in the blue dress is a mannequin. And they had multiple mannequins on stage. And she would just wander around in front of the mannequins, behind the mannequins, whatever. And the camera was tracking her perfectly. And didn't matter where she was, the camera always had a picture of her. Lighting flicker, if you're using LEDs or plasma lights or something and you're shooting at 900 frames per second, that's going to be a problem. So Crosscast has a thing for deflickering. And then low-cost recorders. We've had small recorders for a while, but we have never had a professional HD recorder, audio inputs, VU meters, the whole thing for $295. That's pretty cheap. So they didn't have to have the naked woman. Here's a headline that appeared in the New York Times earlier this week, or last week, about an airplane nearly hitting a drone. And so David showed you the DJI drone, and he didn't show you this, which was the netting that they put up so that it wouldn't accidentally hit somebody. Processing hardware. David told you about the Mac Pro, amazing, 7 teraflops, fantastic, except at the show, Devil and Demon supercomputers had these little desktop computers. The Devil does 15 teraflops, so more than twice what the Apple will do, and that's in the CPU, and then it has a GPU that does another 14 teraflops. And then I have the Sony Alpha 7S camera at the right, and 2 things I want to point out about that. By the way, Sony says that the ISO number, the equivalent of the ASA of the film, if you will, for this is 409,600. So remember when you had film that had a number of 100 or 200 or 400? But everybody says the reason that this camera has such tremendous sensitivity is it's a full-frame 35mm sensor that's twice the size of a 35mm movie frame. And it has only 4K resolution. There's only 12 megapixels on that sensor. And so each of those pixels is really big. Well, someday, if we can apply the computing power a little bit smaller than the desktop, then maybe we can put enough computing power into the camera that it can treat the whole sensor to get the sensitivity, and we can still make little tiny pixels and get higher resolution out of it. But again, back to the current situation where the size of the pixels is determining the sensitivity, here's a recap on 4K. So in favor of 4K, you can reframe in post for HD. Great. If you want to do stereoscopic 3D, you can do it on one sensor. And if you want to deliver 4K straight to the home, you get a third of a grade improvement at normal viewing distances on a 56-inch screen. Go to a larger screen, get closer to the screen, you get a little bit more improvement. What's against it? It's currently less sensitive because the pixels are a quarter of the size of HD pixels. No long zooms, 8 times the data rate uncompressed. No connection standard, not even within the same company. And higher frame rates are required or you get motion aliasing. So why is everybody moving to 4K? I understand why the manufacturers want to do it. They want to sell products. But why does anybody else want to do it? Processing software, as you heard before, there's lots of stuff going on in HEVC or H.265. General Dynamics was showing HEVC splicing. This is something that started with MPEG-2 in broadcast a long time ago. So it's ready. Whenever broadcasters want to do HEVC, they'll have splicing available. And as Mike said, Fraunhofer has been showing HEVC coding. Last year they showed 4K in 5 megabits per second decoding in real time. This year they showed real-time encoding. There's effects to do anything you want. There's corrections at the right. The picture there with the Macbeth color chart is part of something called the Academy Color Predictor app. And it's something you can get for your iPad, and you can enter the type of lighting, the type of filters, the type of sensors, and it tells you what kind of color you're going to get. And then lots of people were talking about grading while shooting or doing color correction in the camera, which requires accurate small monitors, and I'll show you those in a moment. But I'm not telling you much about software because, as Automation News says, the best way to tell if a software works is using it. And I didn't have the time at NAB to use anything. Processing control. Again, the truck is the same size because you need the control surface that's going to be useful. So here's a new control surface that Panasonic came out with, and one of the really, really cool things, and I've shown this to people who love Sony switchers or Grass Valley switchers or Snell switchers, but they adore that Panasonic has these little video buttons. So you can see the clip that you're about to take, and you can see the camera that you're about to take, and it really helps when you're doing lots of stuff with a small surface. Everybody thinks, oh, do everything on computers. Yeah, if it's not live, you can do that. But sports or a concert or something, forget it. Distribution. Some interesting satellite stuff. At the bottom left there is a backpack satellite terminal. It folds into a rucksack, as they say, because they're Brits. Just above that is ThinCom. That's a satellite antenna on the top of that car. It does not deploy. That is deployed. And not only is it deployed, but it will track satellites as the car is moving around at high speeds. In the center is a Dune HD set-top box. You can't quite make it out maybe, but at the right side there's an RJ45 connection there for internet, and the connector on the left is HDMI, so you basically plug the set-top box into your TV, no cable in between. On the right is a transmitter, the HDTX from Cobham. It's on the back of a GoPro Hero. It is not larger than the GoPro Hero, and you can use a smaller antenna if you want. Below that, Bradley Engineering's CCU receiver, again very tiny. And then in the middle there, the tablet TV device, a little strange. This is how it's supposed to work. You transmit from your TV station, and people with TVs can watch your TV programming, but people with iPads can't. So you go into the T-Pod, which then turns it into Wi-Fi, and then people with their iPads can watch what you're transmitting.
Aereo in your house.
Yeah. This was very nice. TerraDeck has something called TerraView, again, for the iPad, but a multi-view. So you can do 4-camera looking at stuff, and you can change various things that you're seeing, make one big, make the other small, and so on. This was an interesting device. Pivothead has tons and tons of stuff, but this one, the smart glasses, they have a 1080p camera, in there. They have a micro SD card to record on. They have GPS. They have a gyro. They have live streaming. They have power packs, all kinds of stuff. This is a pair of glasses. Yeah. And not this particular model, but they have other models that also have the 1080p camera and storage, and they're $199. So here's another company, Smart Telecaster, and they go one step beyond because they say, yeah, you know, that's cool that you can transmit stuff, but how do I talk to you from the studio? So they have two-way systems. The image comes one way, but the sound is duplex. So you can say, so what does it look like at the fire now? Well, I'm standing next to the firefighter in my fire retardant suit. Presentation, nothing really new except, again, this evolution becomes revolution thing. So we've been talking about projectors as monitors for a long time, but Christie and Epson both had some demonstrations this year that kind of looked like you could have a projector as a monitor. LED walls as monitors. Last year, Layard had a wall that was 1.9 millimeter dot pitch. This year, they had a wall that was 1.6 millimeter dot pitch. Last year, Silicon Core had a Magnolia 1.5 millimeter dot pitch panel, little tiny thing about this size. This year, they had a full wall 1.5 millimeter dot pitch. At 1.5 millimeter dot pitch, you have to get pretty close before you can see the dots. So that works even if a camera is shooting the talent. Goggles as monitors, we have a new one, the Zeiss Cinemizer OLED, 870 by 500, and it's ×2, so you can do stereo with it. And then again, the accurate on-camera monitoring. Small HD had this thing where they said grade every shot in real time in the camera, and Atomos had a bunch of monitors on their recorders that had sensors that can be calibrated, and displays that can be calibrated so you can get really great stuff. So they didn't need the naked woman. Couple more little cameras. On the left, the Crosscast Medusa. It's a 340 frame per second camera, about the size of my thumb. And then this Marshall camera on the right, just because Marshall makes cameras. And then finally, this is just to demonstrate a principle. This is a remote control that NetUp had. It has every single key that you would use on a computer keyboard. You can do Control-Alt-Delete on this keyboard. And the reason I'm showing this is just to say that just because something can be done, so thank you very much. Again, there's the URL if you want the slides. And shall we take our positions? Okay.
Thank you very much, Mark. That was very informative. All you gentlemen. While we're getting the next slide up, I just wanted to let you know that we will be showing a recording of this in the newsletter. You can just click on that and see it on our YouTube channel. That will be coming up. And we will also include the link to Mark's slideshow and also Michael's website. So there's a lot of content out there that's just for you that we sort of repackaged. Thank you. I will speak up. So we will have a door prize awarded after the Q&A session. We need a couple of microphones. We have two microphone handlers who have kindly volunteered. But first, by popular demand, we would like to introduce each member of the audience briefly when you get the microphone handed to you. Those should be coming down pretty soon. Do we have microphones? They're on the way. So when you get the microphone, please just state your name and the company that you're with and pass on to the next person. We can get that over with pretty quickly before we get to the question and answer session. And at this time, Ted, if you could pull up the remote telecast of the Connecticut and Long Island subsections, that would be great, at your convenience. And if we have the first person ready with a microphone, looks like Warren is there. Why don't you start past? Okay, it's coming up. Just give it a moment. And when Connecticut and Long Island, when you have a question, I'll try to be watching the screen. Just, the producers, that's very good. Raise your hand if you have a question to ask. Just waiting for the microphone to be passed along. It's coming up. Check it again. Yeah. This is almost as good as live television, folks. Anyone know any jokes?
No, I'm getting hungry.
Great. We're checking the mics here. Want to talk into it? Is it coming? All right. Ted, how are we doing on the microphones? Should be any moment now, folks. We did test them before the show. And there are fresh batteries in there, I can assure you. So while we're waiting for the microphones, Connecticut and Long Island, do you have a question for our panelists? Not yet. Okay.
Check.
Okay, so we have a mic.
Right,
okay.
we're good.
Start passing it along, please.
Great. Hi, Bill Miller, consultant, New York Section Governor, New York Region Governor, and SMPTE Student Chapter Director. And I'd like to congratulate Brian Kobolars, the incoming re-elected Connecticut subsection chair, and Wes Simpson, the re-elected Connecticut subsection secretary treasurer, because we didn't get to that earlier.
I'm John McKenna with Yes Network.
I'm Wendy Wang with Empress Media Asset Management.
Jose Martinez, a freelancer, and I'm studying right now in Full Sail University.
I'm Mark Foreman.
Ray Blumenthal, Tiffin Company, and I'm going to be working around with a microphone, I guess.
Tom Morrow, Imagine Communications. John Furter, CBS, New York Region Governor.
Bill Smith, Insight Media Solutions.
Leanne Reed, Small Business Consultant.
Dick Marcus, Video Engineer.
Farisa, student at New York City College of Technology.
Rio Terrell, Head Teacher.
Jacqueline Anscombe, graduate from New York City College of Technology, Entertainment Tech.
My name is William Waring, and I'm a songwriter.
Andre Gabriel, student, New York City Tech.
Lauren Durham, Mediaverse Information Management.
Barry Grossman, World Stage.
James Leone, Consultant.
Michael Timmer, Concept X.
Mark Stafford with Production Services.
Colin Fund with NBC Universal.
Fred Huffman, Huffman Technical Services.
Ken Rebo, Consultant.
Bob Gross, WPIX.
Harold Borth, formerly with Fox, retired now.
Josh Gordon with the Josh Gordon Group. Paul Kelly, Major League Baseball.
Mike Ricca, Communications Consultant, seeking staff opportunities.
Alexander, NBC.
Steve Snedden, NBC.
Joseph Mastantuono, colorist.
Mike Wang, NBC Universal.
Antonella Caruso, NBC Universal.
Jonathan Abrams, Nutmeg Post.
Matt Galick with Cognizant.
Jeff Cohen, Archimedia.
Matthew Reines-Holtz, Insight Media.
William Laziza, CUNY TV.
Dan Uchuba, NYC Production and Post News.
Terry Pong, ABC Television.
George Veloso, ABC Television.
Dan Kendall, Harmonic.
Larry Houston, Local 600.
Abby Levine, freelance engineer.
Stephen Robinson, freelance engineer.
Ron Harris, Duart, now with 95 edit rooms.
Larry Glenn, Discovery Communications. Eric Tilking, All Mobile Video Broadcast Sales.
Ian McSpadden, TV Technology Magazine.
Jim O'Brien, Avico Automation.
Ken Alexander, NBC Universal.
Nat McKenna, NBC Universal.
Marty Brooks, New York Intermediate Authority.
Ray Pashley, NBC.
Bob Gilmartin, Engineering Consultant.
Tom Michaels, Cognizant.
Casey Pazitsky, Independent.
CJ Leonard, freelancer with background in digital ad operations.
Noel Spector, freelance audio.
Jonathan Solomon, WWE.
Gary Bradley, editor.
Dave Wallace, HBO.
Peter Williamson, MOMA.
Mike Allen, NBC Universal.
Joe Mungie, Duart. Craig Yanagi, JVC Professional.
Bruce Ross from Verizon.
Mark Sasahara, freelance camera guy.
David Leitner, filmmaker.
William Dean, Borough of Manhattan Community College.
Kilpatri Montes de Oca, Borough of Manhattan Community College.
Chalicia, Borough of Manhattan Community College.
David Deaver, Membership Chair, Connecticut, New York Chapter.
John Solanka, producer. Maurice Schechter, Duart.
Paul Healy, Sony Electronics.
Brandon Quickie, the Video Department at Ralph Lauren.
Warren Singer, Video Technology Resources.
John Cerconi, available.
For what?
All right, thank you very much. We are ready for our first question. Please raise your hand and speak into the microphone. To state your name and company before you ask the question, please. Who wants to be first?
Do we want to ask for them to introduce themselves?
I already did.
Oh, but now we can hear them.
Yeah. Connecticut and Long Island, do you have a question? You want to raise your hand if you do?
Oh, to introduce
Not
themselves,
yet.
not questions. To introduce.
Okay. Would you like to introduce yourselves? Okay. Please go ahead. Rich Torpy, why don't you start?
Hey, Rich Torpy, very temporary acting chair, Long Island section.
Next.
Sandy Stern, Tiffin.
Jenna Noyes, Tiffin.
Herb Savrin, New York Institute of Technology.
Patrick Madigan, Verizon.
Dave Ruderman, consultant.
Tom Wahab, MTV Networks.
Mike Pavona, Viacom.
Brian, you're next.
Brian Koblars, Connecticut chapter.
Gene Zarnecki, Manchester Community College.
Cameron Simpson, tech support. Wes Simpson, telecom product consulting.
Very good, thank you. All right, who has the first question in the audience? Gentleman over there, microphone please.
Thank you. Blackmagic has 6 gig SDI and 12 gig SDI, at least if you listen to them. When I went to another manufacturer whose name I'll withhold to protect the guilty, they said, oh, we're not doing that because it's not a standard yet. So what's the likelihood that SMPTE is going to take what Blackmagic did and make it a standard? And if so, how long?
Bill has an answer.
All right. Yeah, it's a SMPTE question.
The 6 gig and 12 gig stuff, I do not believe is a Blackmagic initiative. There are 6 gig and 12 gig documents working their way through the SMPTE standards process right now. I can't tell you off the top of my head in what state of completion they are, but we do have that work undergoing. Mr. Furter probably can help.
Yeah.
give him a mic. Then I'll bring it back to you.
Just to take it away from my former boss and co-governor, actually we had our weekly meeting today of the drafting group of the 6 gig and 12 gig standards, specifically the connectors. We are extremely close. We're within one more session. We have a few comments that still need to be resolved before we're ready to submit to the whole working group, both the 6 gig and 12 gig drafts. And then if approved from the working group, it would pass on to the standard community. So we hope by the Tokyo, which unfortunately I won't attend, but by the Tokyo meetings that we will have solid documents for the community.
Tokyo meetings are the first week of June, so we're talking a month for FCC ballots. So these things are really close, which tells you that we've been working on them for a while, and the work, the SMPTE standards come out of the committee. They don't come from one particular manufacturer normally. And they've been in process for quite a while. I think a lot of that work came out of Genham to start with.
Yes.
Yeah. John Hudson and Nigel Smith. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Do we have another question from the audience? Yes, in the back. Gentleman needs a microphone. It's on the way.
You mainly focused on the hardware aspects of NAB. Software obviously is an extremely important part of our business now, and two aspects which I guess would be a good form of enlightenment from the people that went is editing systems, trends and products, and the way we see it, where you maybe see it going, and the thoughts about color correction.
Well, David addressed both of those points 2 weeks ago, where he talked about how color correctors are now including editorial and vice versa. But my position, and the reason that on my slide I said the only way to tell what software is to use it, is you don't have to go to NAB to try out software. You can generally get a test license or something like that for anything, and then you can put it through the paces. And you don't need to fly to Las Vegas and look at hardware to do that. So that's why I've avoided software.
The other part of software that's challenging, and I made some critical remarks of it last time, is really the workflow stuff, which is gluing all the parts and pieces together of the production, encoding, transcoding, delivery, etc. And I'll quote Elmer Musser, who's our SVP of engineering. Show me the first reference customer, and that's just a show floor. Show me the second reference customer that actually has a working product, and then maybe I'll think about buying it. So that's still a problem. There's a few workflow tools that are in various states of maturity, still all over the show floor, and interestingly didn't come up in conversation. There's a lot more QC tools that are interesting. And in this very building this morning, we had a meeting to work through some of the workflow issues because file interchange is not a given. So there's plenty of stuff yet to do, and buying a software app and just doing one particular piece is certainly doable, but making it flow in a production environment where, to use the HBO example, every time we make a piece of content, we make 85 versions. To keep the Go engine going, etc., there's 85 versions. That's an automated workflow process. And that software is not trivial.
You mentioned editing. The kind of new trend in NAB actually started last year, but it's collaborative workflow editing. You can work on a project with someone who's located around the world, basically, at the same time, the same file.
Long Island or Connecticut, do you have a question? Yes, a hand's gone up. Go ahead, Wes Simpson.
Yeah, it's Wes Simpson. I had a question for Craig. I heard some, at the very beginning of your talk, you were talking about closed captioning, and I understand that there might be some new rules coming forth from the FCC, particularly for over-the-top content. Can you share any of that, and did you see any impact of those rules taking place at NAB?
Well, as I mentioned, the editorial tools just don't integrate closed captioning except for Premiere, and some people who use it and use those features love it. There are several different forks of the FCC rules, and I don't want to go into the specifics of all of them. The IPCC caption rules that regard captioning for broadband, which you mentioned OTT, but it's sort of the same thing. The SMPTE-2052 standard is the safe harbor that the FCC anointed several years ago. That's still in place, and the rules for IP captioning are if something was captioned on television, then it must be captioned online. Those rules are not new. The new efforts for captioning are things like quality, turnaround, reauthoring, captions that were done live and have to be redone. It's Judy from Card Member Services. I've been renewed.
But if you call right now, we'll double the offer.
Anyway, so there are lots of pieces in play with captioning, some of which are in the further notice of proposed rulemaking, where the FCC stuck their toe in the water, and the industry groups are getting a little fired up about responding, and so that's still in process. Comments are due in mid-June, and they say some rules are coming out, quote, summer. So, but IPCC is not a new rule, and the SMPTE 2052 standard is still gaining acceptance. A lot of people use it now for traditional broadcast workflow, because being able to store those funky VBI 608 captions in an XML format is actually kind of interesting for newer workflows. Yes, Mr. Miller.
Yeah, Craig, as I'm sure you're aware, the 2052 standard actually is a whole bunch of different documents lumped under one number.
I was chair of that draft.
Oh, I know you were. Do you see any pieces of that are still missing, or do you think you pretty much got your arms around it at this point?
The only piece that's new, well, the three documents, there's the core standard, there's the 608 translation, the 708 translation, which was new, and there is some effort actually to take some of the work in 2052 that was done in ultraviolet and to take it into the IMF space. So there is some work still ongoing, but the core standard is still stable.
Long Island, do you have a question? Another question from the floor? Anybody? Yes, the gentleman over there. Microphone is coming to you. Just state your name, please, and company.
Dan Ochiva, NYC Production and Post News. I'm wondering what sorts of trends there were in terms of long-term storage. I really didn't see very much of it on the show floor, and related to that, any sorts of news on metadata and who's doing interesting work or agreeing on anything, for that matter.
Well, there was a fair amount of stuff on optical storage on the floor. Fujinon continues to show its PermaVault, which is its cloud-based system. Amazon has cloud-based systems. The USC Digital Repository is a cloud-based system. So there's lots of cloud-based stuff for which on the floor all you need is a little sign saying we offer storage. For hardware, as I say, there was some optical stuff, and then surprisingly, right after NAB, Sony came out with the announcement of extraordinarily dense tape storage.
Yeah. But there still is the archive question of where do you put it in a salt mine and expect to get something back 100 years from now? That needs Merrill Weiss to be here for that. Although Bill raised his hand.
Well, really what I believe is the only thing that works is a constantly migrating archive. Right. And you can either do that yourself. If you're a large organization, you can have an archive department and they can constantly migrate, in which case you can use the cheapest hard drives you can find, because you only need them to work for 3 years or so, and then you migrate to something else. Or you can trust it to one of the cloud-based storage people who are going to do it themselves. So the USC Digital Archive has constant migration, Amazon has constant migration, Google has constant migration.
Bill Miller's next.
Yeah. To add to that, the other issue, of course, is having one common format for all this archiving, and at least the archive exchange format work going on within SMPTE is getting to a point of maturity where I think it's actually going to see a ballot one of these days. And that would be very, very helpful once that gets done, because then you will have one lingua franca for this kind of thing, we hope, rather than everybody's proprietary formats.
I did see a lot of solid state storage, by the way, also. It's more expensive, obviously, but it's starting to come more and more, and the prices are coming down.
Yes, there's another question at the back row there.
Hi.
What's your name and company, please?
Oh, Josh Gordon, the Josh Gordon Group. In our introductions and some of the talks you guys gave, you identified a lot of different trends that are going on. IP video, 4K, storage, the cloud. Is there some world where all of these things kind of work together and you can sort of say, oh, in the next few years we'll do this and then this and then this? Is it just a hodgepodge, or is there any way to make sense of all of these seemingly unrelated trends?
Well, we didn't even talk about,
as we all know,
movies,
television destroyed movies and radio.
Yep. VHS destroyed HBO. That was a trend at the time.
There is nothing wrong with any of the new technologies. Second screen, 4K, 8K, cloud, it's all great stuff. But it doesn't necessarily mean that we migrate everything to that. It becomes another business. So you can have a cloud business, you can have a 4K business while other people are watching standard definition television. Eutelsat had a booth at NAB. I didn't include it in my slides tonight. They had a big poster with a woman jumping for joy, and the captions were 5,000 channels, and then under that it said 500 of them high definition, which means that in 2014, 9/10 of what Eutelsat is carrying is standard definition television.
But that makes
and there's nothing wrong with that.
That makes a lot of sense because they deliver to
sure. Why not?
third world countries and all kinds of stuff, but you still use SD.
And my example of cloud is, how many people here have ever used Google? Okay, everybody has used Google. How many people have a Chromebook computer? One. Okay, so you trust the cloud to some extent, but you don't trust the cloud to another extent. It's the same Google that came up with the Chromebook as came up with the search engine. You like the search engine, you don't like the Chromebook. Now, why don't you like the Chromebook? Maybe you want to have everything in the computer so you can do work when you don't have internet access, which never could happen.
Hi.
Yes, state your name and company, please.
My name is Michael Allen, NBC Universal. With the onset of video over IP, and the industry changing, is this a welcome change for video over IP, and I guess things of that nature? It's sort of I think Josh kind of stole some of my thunder, because we sort of had the same question. I wanted to change it up a little bit. So is the industry welcoming the change with video over IP?
It's another tool. I mean, there were,
with it being implemented in cameras and eventually phasing out of the SDI. I believe that you guys were talking about eventually somewhere down the line.
I come from the distribution side first, and if you look at satellite receivers, for example, they used to have a BNC connector and had ASI on it, and now every vendor has an RJ45 instead. And some form of output of multicast IP for use in cable head ends and other distribution. That was a natural progression of the lower cost of the interface, the simplicity of the integration with existing facilities. And as Mark showed, there are converters. You can hang on a SDI and put it on IP, and the evolution is going to occur over time. I mean, it's just a natural progression of new things coming out. But it doesn't mean that SDI is bad. It's just different. It has applications.
That's true. And thinking about IP is the flexibility is there too. At some point, you're going to have a television in your house that's going to be able to receive, obviously, internet programming, social media, whatever, all on the same platform. That's what marketers want. They want to bring all the eyeballs together. And IP can do that.
Connecticut and Long Island, do you have a question at the moment? Yes. Your name and company?
Jane Zarnecki, Manchester Community College. A question on drones and flying cameras. Does SMPTE have anything to do with the ongoing, or I think they're in Washington trying to develop the rules and regulations right now?
Yes.
Do you have any input in that?
Yes, Bill Miller would like to answer the question if someone would give him a microphone, please.
There's no mic, Bill.
Can we repeat?
Talk loudly.
I can repeat the answer if you wish.
Talk loudly.
It's coming.
It's coming down.
You got it.
The answer, we on? Yeah, okay. The answer is that SMPTE, because it's 501c3, doesn't do any advocacy stuff in Washington. That's outside the scope of what we're legally allowed to do as a C3. But in any case, this is an FAA issue, not an FCC issue. And there's enough other people getting into the act. It is a serious problem. You can make arguments as to whether the FAA has sort of gone over backwards in terms of their rulemaking on this and what they're insisting on. But the fact is that some order has to be brought to this environment, or there's going to be things crashing into each other in the sky. It's bad enough with licensed pilots up there. If you've ever seen the congestion of newscopters, you know, when there's a car chase in LA or something like that, and there's a limited number of helicopters and they're all licensed pilots, you can imagine what would happen if you had 300 or 400 drones up there. Not, you know, I understand why the FAA is taking this seriously.
Yeah, what I heard was that the FAA is going to actually come up with some kind of a licensing system that's very expensive, so that if you want to operate a drone, you have to pay this license. So that'll limit the number of people that actually operate drones.
Well, that's one way to do it. But they've opened a couple of test ranges in, I think, North Dakota.
Yeah, they are testing.
You know, they're testing agricultural stuff and things like that. But the idea is that they're taking this very seriously, but they're actually trying to do something about it as opposed to just saying no. You know, but the answer SMPTE's involved. SMPTE doesn't have an involvement in the regulation process here because we just don't do that.
Right. Do we have another question from the audience? Yes, up here. Microphone's on the way. And state your name and company, please.
Joseph Mastantuono, colorist with Good Post in Brooklyn. I just had a question about all the HDR stuff you were mentioning. And I know that already, just like at 100 nits, when we're looking at stuff, 8 bits of data, of color data, is just, that's already, I feel, I mean, as a colorist, I'm biased, but I just don't think that's enough. So when we move to HDR, is there any sort of standard of moving to 12 bits, or, you know, and is there any standard we're looking at when we're talking about HDR, or is that all pie in the sky still?
It's not pie in the sky, but there are 4 organizations who are pursuing different forms of HDR. Dolby is probably the most visible of them. BBC is another one, Philips is another one, and Technicolor is another one. So all 4 of them are pursuing various forms of HDR, and part of that is what kind of coding should you do. It's not just the bits, but it's how you apply the grayscale to the bits. So Dolby is pushing a particular type of perceptual coding that uses sort of logarithmic and part of the range and power function and another part of the range. As far as the number of bits that are concerned, from a technical standpoint, you can use any dynamic range in any number of bits as long as you have 1/2 of the least significant bit worth of noise. But people think noise is bad, which is not true. Noise is good. So most of the people are talking about 12-bit for the HDR systems.
Dithering's your friend. But one of the things in the HEVC discussion with the cable operators and CE manufacturers, most people talk about HEVC and main 10 at the same time. So the migration from 8 to 10 is almost a certainty as an evolution before we even start talking about HDR. Because yes, 8 bits was not enough.
Is there another question? Then I think that about wraps it up. But before we go, we still have the door prize, which Ray Blumenthal will award. I will assist him with the electronic
We're doing
drawing.
this digitally.
Yes, because that
You're
seems
working
to
on
be
this
the
for
theme
weeks now.
here.
You're counting on your fingers.
Exactly, yes. He's got an abacus.
Yes.
We have the attendee list right on my phone, the second screen here. Ray will randomly pick one from the list. We'll see if they're actually here.
Okay, this.
Phil Cianci, are you here?
What?
No? Phil Cianci? All right, we'll pick another one.
You know, this is going to take
Saw
a
him
little
earlier.
while.
We have lots of people here. Mieta Bookman? Malik Bookman. Are you here? No? Let's pick another one.
They don't know what they're missing.
Yeah. Lauren Dorr? Oh, you are the winner.
You can come up and receive it. What it is, for those of you who want to know, is we at Tiffin, we support the White House News Photographers. Sorry, the White House News Photographers. It's not commercial, but I just want to explain why it's not just a bag. It was only given out to the White House News Photographers. So if you have it, you're not going to find anybody else unless they're a news photographer walking around with it. What?
Will it get me into the White House?
No.
It'll get you on eBay.
And it got me kicked out of the White House.
Thank you.
Stand back for a picture. Show the bag.
Now, any of you manufacturers, it's not just me. You want to bring a door prize to the next show, we're more than happy, or the next meeting, we're more than happy to give it away. So don't be shy.
It's time to fill the bag with it.
It's time to fill the bag. And we'll put them in a new bag, right?
All the 50B filters you can carry away.
So I'd like to thank everybody who attended, and those in up in Connecticut and in Long Island. Some of you I'll see tomorrow. I'd like to thank again our panelists and HBO, and we'll see you next month. And I've forgotten the meeting again, but
June 12th.
June 12th, yes. We'll see you June 12th. Where are we meeting? Where? Oh, sorry. The Cantor Film Center in downtown, NYU's Cantor Film Center. Where and when is the jam?
Jam, yes.
The jam is the 19th, but we don't have a location, right?
We will announce it.
All right. June 19th is the jam, 50 New York. But we do not have the location yet. Thank you again. Oh, wow.